Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind troubled with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Let my voice wash over you at a comfortable volume and allow yourself to be distracted from the stresses and worries that play on your mind. Whether you need help falling asleep or going back to sleep in the middle of the night, you can trust me to keep you company and help you to wake up tomorrow in a rested state. You may need to try out Sleepy Time Tales for a few nights to get used to the slightly strange idea, but I believe it will be well worth your while. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So settle down, relax, and allow yourself to get lost in my telling of tonight's story. Before we get to tonight's reading, I'd like to ask for a few minutes of your time. Sleepy Time Tales is a purely listener-supported podcast. I can only keep it going, paying for the services and tools I use, and justify the time that I use on it thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. So if you're finding Sleepy Time Tales useful, please consider supporting on the Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is monthly support that helps me keep the lights on and gets you bonuses based on your contribution level. So go along there, take a look, and sign up if you're interested. You can also support the show financially by once-off tips to the tip jar on the website. And you can also support the show without having to do so financially, but just telling people about it. So if you know somebody who you think the show would help, just explain where I can find it. Just a quick note as well. People may have noticed that my sound quality has been a little bit up and down the last few episodes. We had a sudden housing crisis, nothing too serious, but we will be settling down in August to a new place, better than the one that we came out of. So please, I just ask for your patience that things are a little bit not quite what they usually are. I think the quality sounds okay, but things may sound a bit different. Just a heads up about that. And also, if you can support the show, a little bit of support as well might take a little bit of sting out of the costs of having to suddenly move and get things moved. But that's just a bonus, not really something for you to make your problem. But thanks for your time. Let's get on with the strangeness of the wood beyond the world. We return today to The Wood Beyond the World by William Morris. Chapter 9. Walter happeneth on the first of those three creatures. What with one thing, what with another, as is having to turn out of his way for sheer rocks, or for slopes so steep that he might not try the peril of them, and again for bogs impassable. It was fully 3 days more before he was quite come out of the stony waste, and by that time, though he had never lacked water, his scanty victual was quite done, for all his careful husbandry thereof. But this troubled him little, whereas he looked to find wild fruits here and there, and to shoot some small deer as hare or coney, and make a shift to cook the same, since he had with him flint and fire steel. Moreover, the further he went, the surer he was that he should soon come across a dwelling, so smooth and fair as everything looked before him. And he had scant fear, save that he might happen on men who should enthrall him. But when he was come down past the first green slopes, he was so worn that he said to himself that rest was better than meat. So little is he had slept for the last 3 days. So he laid him down under an ash tree by a stream side, nor asked what was o'clock, but had his fill of sleep. And even when he awoke in the fresh morning was little fain of rising, but lay betwixt sleeping and waking for some 3 hours more. Then he arose and went further down the next green bent, yet somewhat slowly because of his hunger weakness. And the scent of that fair lane came up to him like the odour of one great nosegay. So he came to where the land was level, and there were many trees as oak and ash, and sweet chestnut and wych elm, and hornbeam and quicken tree. not growing in a close wood or tangled thicket, but set as though in order on the flowery greensward, even as it might be in a great king's park. So came he to a big bird cherry, whereof many boughs hung low down, laden with fruit. His belly rejoiced at the sight, and he caught hold of a bough, and fell to plucking and eating. But whilst he was amidst of this, he heard suddenly, close anigh him, a strange noise of roaring and braying, not very great, but exceeding fierce and terrible, and not like to the voice of any beast that he knew. As has been aforesaid, Walter was no faint heart, but what with the weakness of his travail and hunger, what with the strangeness of his adventure and his loneliness, his spirit failed him. He turned round towards the noise. His knees shook and he trembled. This way and that he looked, and then gave a great cry and tumbled down in a swoon. For very close before him, at his very feet, was the dwarf whose image he had seen before, clad in his yellow coat and grinning up at him from his hideous, hairy countenance. How long he lay there as one dead he knew not, but when he woke again there was the dwarf, sitting on his hams close by him. And when he lifted up his head, the dwarf sent out that fearful, harsh voice again. But this time Walter could make out words therein, and knew that the creature spoke and said, "How now? What art thou? Whence comest? What wantest?" Walter sat up and said, "I am a man. I am Golden Walter. I come from Langton. I want victual." Said the dwarf, writhing his face grievously and laughing forsooth, "I know it all. I asked thee to see what wise thou would lie. I was sent forth to look for thee, and have brought ye loathsome bread with me, such as ye aliens must needs eat. Take it." Therewith he drew a loaf from a satchel which he bore and thrust it towards Walter, who took it somewhat doubtfully for all his hunger. The dwarf yelled at him, "Art thou a dainty alien? Wouldst thou have flesh? Well, give me thy bow and an arrow or two, since thou art lazy sick, and I'll get thee a coney or a hare, or quail maybe. Ah, I forgot, thou art dainty, and will not eat flesh as I do, blood and all together. Thus needs half burn it in the fire, or mar it with hot water, as they say my lady does, or as the wretch, the thing, does. I know that, for I have seen it eating." "Nay," said Walter, "this sufficeth." And he fell to eating the bread, which was sweet between his teeth. When he had eaten for a while, for hunger compelled him, he said to the dwarf, "But what meanest thou by the wretch and the thing? And what lady is thy lady?" The creature let out another wordless roar as of furious anger, and then the words came, "It hath a face white and red like to thine, and hands white as thine, yea, but whiter. And the like it is underneath its raiment, only whiter still. For I have seen it, yes, I have seen it. Ah, yes, and yes, and yes." And therewith his words ran into gibber and yelling, and he rolled about and smote the grass. But in a while he grew quiet again and sat still, and then fell to laughing horribly again, and then said, "But thou, fool, wilt think it fair if thou fallest into its hands, and wilt repent it thereafter as I did. Oh, the mocking and jibes of it, and the tears and shrieks of it, and the knife. What sayest thou of my lady? What lady? O alien, what other lady is there? And what shall I tell thee of her? It is like that she has made me, as she made the bear men. But she made not the wretch, the thing, and she hateth it sorely as I do, and some day to come." Thereat he brake off, and fell to wordless yelling a long while, and thereafter spake all panting, "Now I have told thee overmuch, and know if my lady come to hear thereof. Now I will go." And therewith he took out 2 more loaves from his wallet, and tossed them to Walter, and so turned and went his ways, whiles walking upright, as Walter had seen his image on the quay of Langton, whiles bounding and rolling like a ball thrown by a lad, while scuttling along on all fours like an evil beast, and ever and anon giving forth that harsh and evil cry. Walter sat a while after he was out of sight, so stricken with horror and loathing, and a fear of he knew not what, that he might not move. Then he plucked up a heart and looked to his weapons and put the other loaves into his scrip. Then he arose and went his ways, wondering, yea, and dreading what kind of creature he should next fall in with. For soothly it seemed to him that it would be worse than death if they were all such as this one, and that if it were so, he must needs slay and be slain. Chapter 10. Walter happeneth on another creature in the strange land. But as he went on through the fair and sweet land, so bright and sunlitten, and he now rested and fed, the horror and fear ran off from him, and he wandered on merrily. Neither did aught before him save the coming of night, when he laid him down under a great spreading oak with his sword drawn ready to hand, and fell asleep at once, and woke not till the sun was high. Then he arose and went on his way again, and the land was no worse than yesterday, and even better, might be. The greensward more flowery, the oaks and chestnuts greater. Deer of divers kinds he saw, and might easily have got his meat thereof. But he meddled not with them, since he had his bread, and was timorous of lighting a fire. Withal he doubted little of having some entertainment, and that might be, naught evil, since even then that fearful dwarf had been courteous to him after his kind, and had done him good and not harm. But of the happening on the wretch and the thing, whereof the dwarf spake, he was yet somewhat afeard. After he had gone a while, and when as the summer morn was at its greatest, he saw a little way ahead a grey rock rising up from amidst the ring of oak trees. So he turned thither straightway, for in this plain land he had seen no rocks heretofore, and as he went he saw that there was a fountain gushing out from under the rock, which ran thence into a fair little stream. And when he had the rock and the fountain, and the stream clear before him, lo, a child of Adam sitting beside the fountain, under the shadow of the rock. He drew a little nigher, and then he saw that it was a woman, clad in green like the sward whereon she lay. She was playing with the welling out of the water, and she had trussed up her sleeves to the shoulder, that she might thrust her bare arms therein. Her shoes of black leather lay on the grass beside her, and her feet and legs yet shone with the brook. Belike amidst the splashing and clatter of the water she did not hear him drawing nigh, so that he was close to her before she lifted up her face and saw him. And he beheld her, that it was the maiden of the thrice-seen pageant. She reddened when she saw him, and hastily covered up her legs with her gown skirt, and drew down the sleeves over her arms, but otherwise stirred not. As for him, he stood still, striving to speak to her, but no word might he bring out, and his heart beat sorely. But the maid spake to him in a clear, sweet voice, wherein he was now no trouble. Thou art an alien, art thou not? For I have not seen thee before. Yea, he said, I am an alien. Wilt thou be good to me? She said, and why not? I was afraid at first, for I thought it had been the king's son. I looked to see none other, for of godly men he has been the only one here in this land for a long time, till thy coming. He said, Didst thou look for my coming at about this time? Oh nay, she said, how might I? Said Walter, I wot not, but the other man seemed to be looking for me and knew of me, and he brought me bread to eat. She looked on him anxiously and grew somewhat pale as she said, What other one? Now Walter did not know what the dwarf might be to her, fellow servant or what not, so he would not show his loathing of him, but answered wisely, the little man in the yellow raiment. But when she heard that word, she went suddenly very pale and leaned her head back, and beat the air with her hands, but said presently in a faint voice, I pray thee talk not of that one while I am by, or even think of him if thou mayst forbear. He spake not, and she was a little while before she came to herself again. Then she opened her eyes and looked upon Walter and smiled kindly on him, as though to ask his pardon for having scared him. Then she rose up in her place and stood before him, and they were nigh together, for the stream betwixt them was little. But he still looked anxiously upon her and said, "Have I hurt thee? I pray thy pardon." She looked on him more sweetly still and said, "Oh nay, thou wouldst not hurt me, thou." Then she blushed very red, and he in likewise. But afterwards she turned pale and laid a hand on her breast, and Walter cried out hastily, "O me, I have hurt thee again. Wherein have I done amiss?" In naught," she said, "but I am troubled. I wot not wherefore. Some thought had taken hold of me, and I know it not. Mayhappen in a little while I shall know what troubles me. Now I bid thee depart from me a little, and I will abide here. And when thou comest back, will either be that I have found it out or not, and in either case I will tell thee." He spoke earnestly to him, and he said, "How long shall I abide away?" Her face was troubled as she answered him, "For no long while." He smiled on her and turned away, and went a space to the other side of the oak trees, when she was still within eyeshot. There he abode until the time seemed long to him, but he schooled himself and forbore it. For he said, "Lest she send me away again." So he abided again until the time seemed long to him, and she called not to him. But once again he forbore to go. And at last he arose, and his heart beat, and he trembled, and he walked back again speedily and came to the maiden, who was still standing by the rock of the spring, her arms hanging down, her eyes downcast. She looked up at him as he drew nigh, and her face changed with eagerness as she said, "I'm glad thou art come back, though it be no long since thy departure." Sooth to say, it was scarce half an hour in all. "Nevertheless, I have been thinking many things, and thereof will I now tell thee." He said, "Maiden, there is a river between us, though it be no big one. Shall I not stride over and come to thee, that we may sit down together side by side on the green grass?" "Nay," she said, "not yet. Tarry a while till I have told thee of matters. I must now tell thee of my thoughts in order." Her colour went and came now, and she plaited the folds of her gown with restless fingers. At last she said, "Now the first thing is this, that though thou hast seen me first only within this hour, thou hast set thine heart upon me to have me for thy speech friend and thy darling. And if this be not so, then is all my speech, yea, all my hope, come to an end at once." "Oh, yea," said Walter, "even so it is. But how thou hast found this out I wot not, since now for the first time I say it, that thou art indeed my love and my dear and my darling." "Hush," she said, "hush, lest the wood have ears, and thy speech is loud. Abide, and I shall tell thee how I know it. Whether this love shall outlast the first time that thou holdest my body in thine arms, I wot not, nor dost thou. But sore is my hope that it may be so. For I also, though it be but scarce an hour since I set eyes on thee, have cast mine eyes on thee to have thee for my love, and my darling, and my speech friend. And this is how I wot that thou lovest me, my friend. Now is this all dear and joyful, and overflows my heart with sweetness. But now must I tell thee of the fear and the evil which lieth behind it." Then Walter stretched out his hands to her and cried out, "Yea, yea, for whatever evil entangle us, now we both know these two things, to wit, that thou lovest me and I thee. Wilt thou not come hither, that I may cast my arms about thee and kiss thee? If not thy kind lips or thine friendly face at all, yet at least thy dear hand, yea, that I might touch thy body in some wise." She looked on him steadily and said softly, "Nay, this above all things must not be, and that it may not be as a part of the evil which entangles us. But hearken, friend, once again I tell thee that thy voice is overloud in this wilderness fruitful of evil. Now I have told thee indeed of two things, whereof we both wot. But next I must needs tell thee of things whereof I wot, and thou wottest not. Yet this were better, that thou pledge thy words not to touch so much as one of my hands, and that we go together a little way, hence away from these tumbled stones, and sit down upon the open greensward, whereas here is cover if there be spying abroad. Again as she spoke, she turned very pale. But Walter said, "Since it must be so, I pledge thee that my words to thee as I love thee." And therewith she knelt down and did on her footgear, and then sprang lightly over the rivulet. And then the twain of them went side by side on half a furlong hence, and sat down, shadowed by the boughs of a slim quicken tree, growing up out of the greensward, whereon for a good space around was neither bush nor brake. There began the maiden to talk soberly, and said, "This is what I must needs say to thee now, for thou art come into a land perilous for any one that loveth thought of good, from which forsooth I were fain that thou wert gotten away safely, even though I should die of longing for thee. As for myself, my peril is in a measure less than thine, I mean the peril of death. But though the sign on my foot is token that I am a thrall, and thou knowest in what wise thralls must pay for transgressions. Furthermore, of what I am and how I came hither, time would fail me to tell. But some while, maybe, I shall tell thee. I serve an evil mistress, of whom I may say that scarce I wot if she be a woman or not. But by some creatures is she accounted for a god, and as a god is harried, and surely never a god was crueler nor colder than she. Me she hateth sorely, yet if she hate me little or naught, small were the gain to me if it were her pleasure to deal hardly by me. But as things now are and are like to be, it would not be for her pleasure, but for her pain and loss to make an end of me. Therefore, as I said, e'en now, my mere life is not in peril with her, unless perchance some sudden passion get the better of her, and she slay me, and repent of it thereafter. For so it is that if it be the least evil of her conditions that she is wanton, at least wanton she is to the letter. Many a time hath she cast the net for the catching of some goodly young man, and her latest prey, save it be thou, is the young man whom I named, when first I saw thee, by the name of the king's son. He is with us yet, and I fear him, for of late hath he wearied of her, though it is but plain truth to say of her, that she is the wonder of all beauties of the world. He hath wearied of her, I say, and hath cast his eyes upon me, and if I were heedless, he would betray me to the uttermost of the wrath of my mistress. For needs must I say of him, though he be a goodly man, and now fallen into thraldom, that he hath no bowels of compassion, as a dastard who for an hour's pleasure would undo me, and thereafter would stand by smiling, taking my mistress' pardon with good cheer, while for me there would be no pardon. Seest thou, therefore, how it is with me between these two cruel fools, and moreover there are others of whom I will not even speak to thee. And therewith she put her hands before her face and wept, and murmured, Who shall deliver me from this death and life? But Walter cried out, What else am I come hither? I. And it was a near thing that he did not take her in his arms, but he remembered his pledged word, and drew back from her in terror, whereas he had an inkling of why she would not suffer it, and he wept with her. But suddenly the maid left weeping, and said in a changed voice, Friend, whereas thou speakest of delivering me, it is more likely that I shall deliver thee. And now I pray thy pardon for thus grieving thee with my grief, and that ever especially because thou mayest not solace thy grief with kisses and caresses. But so it was, and for once I was smitten by the thought of the anguish of this land, and the joy of all the world besides. Therewith she caught her breath in a half-sob, but refrained her and went on. Now, dear friend and darling, take good heed to all that I say to thee, whereas thou must do after the teaching of my words. And first I deem by the monster having met thee at the gates of this land, and refreshed thee, that the mistress hath looked for thy coming. Nay, by thy coming hither at all, that she hath cast her net and caught thee. Hast thou noticed aught that might seem to make this more like? Said Walter, 3 times in full daylight have I seen go past me the images of the monster, and thee, and a glorious lady, even as if ye were alive. And therewith he told her in few words how it had gone with him since that day on the quay at Langton. Then it is no longer perhaps, but certain, that thou art her latest catch, and even so I deemed from the first. And dear friend, this is why I have not suffered thee to kiss or caress me, so sore as I longed for thee. For the mistress will have thee for her only, and hath lured thee hither for naught else. And she is wise in wizardry, even as some deal am I. And wert thou to touch me with hand or mouth on my naked flesh, yea, or were it even my raiment, then would she scent the savour of thy love upon me. And then, though it may be she would spare thee, she would not spare me. Then she was silent a little, and seemed very downcast. And Walter held his peace from grief and confusion, and helplessness, for of wizardry he knew naught. At last the maid spake again, and said, Nevertheless, we will not die redeless. Even now thou must look to this, that from henceforth it is thee, and not the king's son, whom she desireth, and that so much the more that she hath not set eyes on thee. Remember this, whatsoever her seeming may be to thee. Now therefore shall the king's son be free, though he know it not, to cast his love on whom he will, and in a way I shall be free to yeasay him. Though forsooth, so fulfilled is she with malice and spite, that even then she may turn around on me to punish me for doing that which she would have me do. Now let me think of it. Yea, all things are perilous, and a perilous rede I have thought of, wherefore I will not tell thee as yet. So waste not the short while by asking me. At least the worst will be no worse than what shall come if we strive not against it. And now, my friend, amongst perils it is growing more and more perilous, that we twain shall be longer together. But I would say one thing yet, and maybe another thereafter. Thou hast cast thy love upon one who will be true to thee, whatsoever may befall. Yet is she a guileful creature, and might not help it her life long, and now for thy very sake must needs be more guileful now than ever before. And as for me, the guileful, my love have I cast upon a lovely man, and one true and simple, and a stout heart. But at such a pinch is he, that if he withstand all temptation, his withstanding may belike undo both him and me. Therefore swear we both of us that by both of us shall all guile and all falling away be forgiven on the day when we shall be free to love each other as our hearts will. Walter cried out, O love, I swear it indeed. Thou art my hallow, and I will swear it as on all the relics of a hallow. On thy hands and thy feet I swear it. The word seemed to her a dear caress, and she laughed and blushed, and looked full kindly on him. And then her face grew solemn, and she said, On thy life I swear it. Then she said, Now is there naught for thee to do but go straight hence to the golden house, which is my mistress's house, and the only house in this land, save one which I may not see, and lieth southward no long way. How she will deal with thee I wot not, but all I have said of her and thee and the king's son is true. Therefore I say to thee, be wary and cold at heart, whatsoever outward semblance thou mayest make. If thou have to yield thee to her, then yield rather late than early, so as to gain time, yet not so late as to seem shamed in yielding for fear's sake. Hold fast to thy life, my friend, for in warding that, thou wardest me from grief without remedy. Thou wilt see me ere long, maybe tomorrow, it may be some days hence. So forget not that what I may do, that I am doing. Take heed also that thou pay no more heed to me, or rather less, than if thou wert meeting a maiden of no account on the streets of thine own town. O my love, barren is this first farewell, as was our first meeting. But surely there be another meeting better than the first, and the last farewell may be long and long yet. Therewith she stood up, and he knelt before her a little while without any word, and then arose and went his ways. But when he had gone a space, he turned about and saw her still standing in the same place. She stayed a moment when she saw him turn, and then turned herself about. So he departed through the fair land, and his heart was full with hope and fear as he went. Chapter 9. Walter happeneth on the mistress. It was but a little afternoon when Walter left the maid behind. He steered south by the sun as the maid had bidden him, and went swiftly, for as a good knight wending to battle, the time seemed long to him till he should meet his foe. So an hour before sunset he saw something white and gay gleaming through the boles of the oak trees. And presently there was clear before him a most goodly house builded of white marble, carved all about with knots and imagery, and the carven folk were all painted of their lively colours, whether it were their raiment or their flesh, and the housing wherein they stood all done with gold and fair hues. Gay were the windows of the house, and there was a pillared porch before the great door, with images betwixt the pillars both of men and beasts. And when Walter looked up to the roof of the house, he saw that it gleamed and shone. All the tiles were of yellow metal, which he deemed to be of very gold. All this he saw as he went, and tarried not to gaze upon it. For he said, Belike there will be time for me to look on all this before I die. But he said also that though the house was not the greatest, it was beyond compare of all the houses of the world. Now he entered by the porch and came into a hall many pillared, and vaulted over, the walls painted with gold and ultramarine, the floor dark and spangled with many colours, and the windows glazed with knots and pictures. Midmost thereof was a fountain of gold, whence the water ran 2 ways in gold-lined runnels, spanned twice with little bridges of silver. Long was that hall, and now not very light, so that Walter was come past the fountain before he saw any folk therein. Then he looked up toward the high seat, and he seemed that a great light shone thence, and dazzled his eyes. And he went on a little way, and then fell on his knees. For there before him on the high seat sat the wondrous lady, whose lively image had been shown to him thrice before. And she was clad in gold and jewels as he had erst seen her. But now she was not alone, for by her side sat a younger man, goodly enough, so far as Walter might see him, and most richly clad, with a jewelled sword by his side, and a chaplet of gems on his head. They held each other by the hand, and seemed to be in dear converse together, but they spake softly, so that Walter might not hear what they said. Till at last the man spake aloud to the lady, Seest thou not that there is a man in the hall? Yea, she said, I see him yonder, kneeling on his knees. Let him come nigher, and give some account of himself. So Walter stood up and drew nigh, and stood there, all shamefaced and confused, looking on these twain, and wondering at the beauty of the lady. As for the man, who was slim and black-haired, and straight-featured, all his goodliness Walter accounted him little, and nowise deemed him to look chieftain-like. Now the lady spake, not to Walter any more than erst, but at last the man said, Why dost thou not kneel as thou didst erewhile? Why dost thou not kneel as thou didst erewhile? Walter was on the point of giving him back a fierce answer, but the lady spake and said, Nay, friend, it matters not whether he kneel or stand, but he may say, if he will, what he would have of me, and wherefore he has come hither. Then spake Walter, for as wroth and ashamed as he was, Lady, I have strayed into this land, and come to thine house, as I suppose, and if I be not welcome, I may depart straight away, and seek a way out of thy land, if thou wouldst drive me thence, as well as out of thine house. Thereat the lady turned and looked on him, and when her eyes met his, he felt a pang of fear and desire mingled shoot through his heart. This time she spoke to him but coldly, without either wrath or any thought of him. Newcomer, she said, I have not bidden thee hither, but here mayst thou abide a while if thou wilt. Nevertheless, take heed that there is no king's court. There is forsooth the folk that serveth me, or it may be more than one, of whom thou wert best to know naught. Of others I have but 2 servants, whom thou wilt see, and the one is a strange creature who should scare thee, or will scathe thee with a good will, but of a good will shall serve naught save me. The other is a woman, a thrall of little avail, save that being compelled she will work woman's service for me, but whom none else shall compel. Yea, but what is all this to thee, or to me, that I should tell it to thee? I will not drive thee away, but if thine entertainment please thee not, make no plaint thereof to me, but depart at thy will. Now is this talk betwixt us over long, since, as thou seest, I and this king's son are in converse together. Art thou a king's son? Nay, lady, said Walter, I am but of the sons of the merchants. It matters not, she said. Go thy ways and into one of the chambers. And straightway she fell a-talking to the man who sat beside her concerning the singing of the birds beneath her window in the morning, and of how she had bathed her that day in a pool of the woodlands, when she had been heated with hunting and so forth, and all as if there had been none of there save her and the king's son. But Walter departed all ashamed, as though he had been a poor man thrust away from a rich kinsman's door. And he said to himself that this woman was hateful and naught love-worthy, and that she was little like to tempt him, despite all the fairness of her body. No one else he saw in the house that even. He found meat and drink duly served on a fair table, and thereafter he came on a goodly bed, and all things needful, but no child of Adam to do him service, or bid him welcome or warning. Nevertheless he ate and drank and slept, and put off thought of all these things till the morrow, all the more as he hoped to see the kind maiden sometime betwixt sunrise and sunset on that new day. And before I go into the next chapter, I think I'm going to call it there. This is a very strange and interesting read, and I'm quite enjoying it. So if you'd like to carry on where I'm leaving off, as usual, you can find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to follow or subscribe in whatever service you use, so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. Good night, and sweet dreams.